County group home for Negro boys. The book is set in 1967 and 1968. And Kasha is facing all of the trauma of the 1960s as a Black woman in the rural South. But more importantly, she's dealing with the after effects of having two brothers in Vietnam. One brother comes home, the other brother is missing in action. This book is very much dedicated to my uncle MJ, who wasn't really my uncle, but he played the role in my life. He was my dad's best friend. And my uncle MJ struggled coming back from Vietnam, as did so many of the men and women who served there. And he would often take care of me on Sundays. I was a very sickly child. I had asthma and bronchitis, so a lot of Sundays I would be with him and reading my books, and he would, be a little bit with the bottle. And the more of the bottle he consumed, the more he would share stories that he probably had no reason to or should have shared. But one in particular, he was in a very bad fix that day, and I know he said, "Come here, little girl." And I went over to him and he said, "You know something?" And I said, "No, sir, what?" He said, "You know what they should have done to the Marines who came back from that war?" I said, "No, sir, I don't know what they should have done." He said, "They should have put a bullet to our heads." He said, "We were no more good for anybody after they made us do what we did." And then he told me all of the stories. And so I said to myself, even as a young child, I'm going to tell Uncle MJ stories. I want somebody to know what he went through. So maybe there won't be other men and women going out to fight wars. I was a very hopeful child that my words could change the world. I thought one little bit of my pen magic and I could stop wars and hunger and all the other atrocities in the world. Who knows, maybe I still can. There's still time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read a little bit. This is a scene between Kasha and one of the boys in the group home. Not long after the boys entered the house, I heard a light knocking on my door. I felt like hiding under my desk. I wasn't ready to see anyone. I needed another few hours to regroup, but I didn't have that kind of time. I was needed, here and at home. There was nowhere for me to hide. "Come in." I took off my reading glasses and placed them on my desk as Chad opened the door and walked into the room, an uncertain look on his face. "You still mad at me?" he asked, stopping in front of my desk. He shifted from one foot to the other, his eyes squarely on the floor. "Look at me, Chad," I said. He didn't move. "Chad, look at me." He looked up, apprehension in his eyes. He was such a big little boy, so afraid that his number one ally, me, was going to abandon him like everybody else in his life had. "I'm not mad," I said, observing him closely. "You apologized, and I forgave you. That's the end of it." He observed me just as closely as if he was trying to figure out my mood. "You look sad about the eyes. You okay, Miss Kasha?" His astuteness stunned me. I cleared my throat. "I'm okay, Chad. It's been a long day. How was school?" I wanted to shift the focus off me. "Okay." He paused for a moment and then said what I knew must have been on his mind all day. "Miss Kasha, is that white lady gonna send me back to live with Lena? I don't want to go back to live with her." "Mrs. Gates," I corrected. "You know her name. We use names around here." "Is Mrs. Gates gonna send me to go live back with Lena?" Chad had a fearful look on his face as if he were bracing himself for my answer. I sighed and got up from my chair, making my way around the desk to where Chad stood. "Let's go sit. You're too tall for me to talk to you while you're standing, and I'm not." He went over to the couch and I followed him. After we both sat down, I gathered my thoughts before responding to his question. "Chad, what is the one thing I always tell you boys? No matter how tired or overwhelmed I felt, I wanted to make sure Chad wasn't confused about anything pertaining to his case. Some things I couldn't resolve, but the things I did have power over, I wanted him to know about from my mouth to his ears. You say you won't ever lie to us. You say no matter how tough the truth might be, you'll always tell it to us. I reached over and took his hands, big bare paws within mine. I will fight with everything in me to keep you safe, but I'm just one person. I don't know what a judge will say. Chad jerked away his hand, balled them into fists, his face instantly growing dark with me. I could just run away. I don't need nobody to look after me. Okay, I said slowly, as if I were considering his suggestion. If you think you're prepared to live on your own, who am I to stop you? He looked at me. My words did not match up with what he expected me to say. You would just let me leave? You would just let me go without a fight? He appeared hurt by my nonchalance, but I wanted him to see for himself how ridiculous and dangerous his impulsive idea was. Well, I would tell you that you need money to live on your own. And as far as I know, you don't have any money, or at least not enough to take care of yourself, which means you would have to get a job. And because of your age, legal jobs would be impossible, I said. So how do you think you would be able to support yourself? I know people, he mumbled. Somebody would help me. No one on the streets helps folks without a price, Chad, I said. You know that. I don't want you to make a hasty decision because you're afraid. Give me a chance to figure the situation out. Don't do something that will make things worse. Will you do that for me? Will you just hold on and believe that I'm fighting for you day and night? Chad was quiet. Normally, he was the kid with the slick mouth. No matter the question or point being made, he had a quippy response. I was surprised that he just sat and watched me. At last, he spoke. Your eyes are puffy. You been crying? I thought about lying to him, but I tried my best to always be honest with the boys. I got some bad news about my brothers. Them, he said, pointing at a picture on my desk of the twins wearing their Marine uniforms. Chad was such an observant child. He saw things most children his age didn't. It worried me some. He looked like a grown man, and sometimes he sounded like one. I prayed no one ever took advantage of my gentle giant. Yes, I said. They dead? He asked, looking at me intently. They get shot up by the Viet Cong? I heard tell of them on the news. They some badasses. Watch your mouth, Chad. Say it differently. I'm sorry. I should have said them Vietnam is some bad men. Is that better? He looked at me for approval, and I smiled, even though this conversation was breaking my heart. I didn't want to entertain the idea that either of my brothers might be dead instead of missing. Missing was bad enough, but at least they might be captured somewhere, maybe by people who could see the tragedy of this war and might practice a hint of compassion towards my little brothers. I couldn't make myself believe that every person over there wanted this war any more than many of us here. I had to believe that there was goodness everywhere on God's green earth, including in the place where my brothers and others like them were fighting for their lives. I pray they aren't dead, Chad, but unfortunately, I don't know for sure. All we know is that they're missing in action. Chad nodded. My Uncle Lenny died over there. He wasn't my real uncle, but he looked out for me when he could. He was a junkie too, but he wasn't as bad as Lena. I'm sorry to hear that, Chad. This war is brutal. A lot of good men and women are dying over there. My sincere prayer is that it will end soon. Chad stood up. I should go do my homework. I smiled. When Chad had first moved into the group home, getting him to do his homework was almost impossible. But now, 6 months later, he seemed to like to get his homework done, and he even went out of his way to help his friend Pee-wee with his. Every Friday after school, if the boys had done their homework and tried their best, Jason would take them to Dairy Queen for ice cream. And so far, Chad hadn't missed a trip. At the morning staff meeting, we discussed whether he should forego Dairy Queen due to his behavior, but I argued in his favor. Rightly or wrongly, I blamed his caseworker for his behavior more than I did him. Let Mr. Jason know if you need help with your math, I said. I don't need no help, he said with a grin. My teachers say I'm good with numbers, and if I keep on, I could work for NASA someday. Oh, so you want to work for NASA? He nodded, and his face radiated with pride. Yes, ma'am. I want to be just like Scotty on Star Trek. I want to boldly go where no man has gone before, he said proudly, quoting the line from his favorite show. We didn't let them watch much television, and I wasn't exactly pleased with the skimpy outfits of the women on Star Trek. But I did like y'all say it for me. Uhura?
Uh-huh.
Yes. I don't know why it got stuck in my throat. And I did like that half the boys were into science and math, hoping that someday they too could fly around the universe like Captain Kirk and the crew of the USS Enterprise. Almost all of their playtime was spent pretending they were the Star Trek crew. All right, Mr. Scotty, I said, you go get that homework done. I'll check in with you before I leave. Yes, ma'am, he said, and started walking towards the door, but before he left the room, he stopped and turned to face me. Miss Kasha, his voice trailed. Yes? What is it? I watched as he struggled, almost like he didn't want to say whatever it was that was on his mind. Just say it, Chad, whatever it is. Miss Kasha, I wish you were my mama, he said, and then hurried out the door. I was stunned. Not so much that he wished I was his mama. Other boys had said similar things to me over the decade that I'd worked at the group home. I usually just let it flow over me, but his words hit differently. My thoughts rushed back to last year when I had an emergency hysterectomy. I'd always had difficult periods, but they got so bad last year that I doubled over in pain while walking from the house to my truck. One day while I was getting ready for work, the pain became so intense I passed out. The next thing I knew, I was waking up inside the Negro Hospital in Tuskegee. Miss Daniels, my name is Dr. Shaw, and I'm going to be honest with you. There is an unusually large mass inside your uterus, and although I don't know for sure until we get inside, I don't think I will be able to save it. A hysterectomy, I said as Mama squeezed my hand. But I don't have any children. I'm not married. This isn't right. He went on to explain everything to me, but all I could think about was the family I thought I still had time to have. With this news, I could no longer see that in my future. Unlike most women, I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about getting married and having children. I was busy taking care of my mama, my brothers, and the boys at the group home, yet the thought of not being able to give birth was devastating. Just like the doctor had warned, there was no saving my uterus. When I awakened after the surgery and saw the look on Mama's face, I instantly knew. I cried in her arms, and then in true Kasha fashion, I tucked my pain away and focused my attention on everyone else. Thank you.